The first thing the galaxy heard from Earth was not a threat. It was not a plea. It was 7 seconds of silence. That was what made the Dominion Assembly stop laughing. One moment, the rulers of 900 conquered systems were watching a single human medical vessel drift beneath the execution lights of their capital station, its white hull scarred, its engines dim, its markings so harmless that several war ministers had openly mocked it on the live broadcast. The next moment, every Dominion flagship in orbit went dark at the same time, not damaged, not attacked, simply silent. Their engines died, their weapon halos vanished, their command thrones lost power. Even the ancient golden crown above High Sovereign Malakar's head flickered once, as if something buried deeper than his empire had briefly forgotten who he was. Then the lights returned. No explosion followed. No human fleet appeared. No secret cannon opened from Earth's little ship. The medical vessel remained exactly where it had been, alone under 1,000 alien guns, carrying a crew too small to invade a moon and a hull too thin to survive one proper shot. Yet across the assembly, no one laughed anymore, because every military mind in that chamber understood the same impossible truth. For 7 seconds, humanity had touched the throat of the Dominion and chosen not to squeeze. Commander Lyra Dane stood at the center of the surrender platform with her hands folded behind her back. She wore no armor, only a dark blue uniform with the Silver Earth emblem stitched over her heart. Before her lay the treaty that would reduce humanity to a labor species, strip mine Earth's oceans, seize its orbital habitats, and place every human child under Dominion guidance before adulthood. Around her, towering representatives stared from crystal balconies, scale-covered thrones, pressure tanks, bone chairs, and floating judgment pods. Their faces had been built by evolution to show hunger, superiority, contempt, and cruelty in 100 different ways. But now they all showed the same thing: uncertainty. High Sovereign Malakar leaned forward on his black glass throne. His species had no eyelids, so when he was afraid, he could not hide it by blinking. The golden veins beneath his translucent skin pulsed too fast. He looked at the sealed black transmitter resting beside the surrender treaty, a device no larger than a human hand, plain, matte, and ugly against the jeweled table of conquest. "What did you do?" he asked. Lyra did not look at the fleets outside. She did not look at the treaty. She looked only at the ruler who had already divided Earth among his governors before humanity had even signed. "I asked for your attention," she said. Somewhere in the upper gallery, a Dominion admiral tried to laugh again, but the sound died before it became anything useful. Across the broadcast channels, billions of conquered beings watched from factory worlds, prison moons, tribute colonies, and silent refugee ships. They had tuned in to witness Earth kneel. Instead, they had seen the masters of the galaxy flinch. Malakar's claws tightened around the arms of his throne. Earth brought no fleet. "No," Lyra said softly. "You brought no siege engines. No, you came here in a hospital ship." Yes, the insult should have restored the Assembly's courage. It should have reminded them that humanity was young, cornered, outnumbered, and laughably underarmed. Instead, the word settled over them like a warning. A hospital ship meant mercy. A hospital ship meant casualties expected. A hospital ship meant humans had known someone would need saving before the first weapon fired. Malakar turned toward his command priests. "Scan it again." "We already have Sovereign," one of them whispered. "No war core, no hidden batteries, no shield breakers, no antimatter chambers." "Then scan the transmitter." The priest lowered his many eyes. "We tried." Malakar's voice sharpened. "And it answered before we touched it." For the first time, Lyra's expression changed. Not a smile, not pride, something colder than both. The look of someone who had carried a secret through years of terror and had finally reached the place where fear belonged to someone else. Malachar rose, slowly. Humanity will explain itself. Lyra placed one hand on the surrender treaty, but she did not sign. Her fingers rested over the line where Earth was supposed to become property. Not yet, she said. First, you will give us one demonstration. The word demonstration moved through the Dominion assembly like a blade passing under silk. It did not cause panic at first. Panic would have required the rulers of 900 systems to admit that a human in a medical uniform had unsettled them. Instead, it caused something quieter and more dangerous. Calculation. Every throne, every balcony, every suspended judgment pod turned inward for a moment as ancient minds searched for the trap they had failed to see. High Sovereign Malachar did not sit down. He remained standing above Lyra Dane, taller than any human by 3 full heads. His translucent body filled with veins of molten gold that pulsed faster each time his command priests whispered new reports into his private channel. Outside the capital station, the Dominion fleets had returned to power, but none of their captains had reactivated their weapons without permission. That alone told Lyra everything she needed to know. For 7 seconds, the Empire had become aware of its own neck. "You are in no position to request anything," Malachar said, but his voice no longer filled the hall the way it had before. It had edges now, sharp enough to cut, but not heavy enough to crush. "You stand on our surrender platform. Your world has been surrounded. Your colonies are mapped. Your supply lines are named. Your species survives because I have not yet ended this ceremony." Lyra kept her hand on the treaty, then ended. A faint ripple crossed the chamber. Several lesser governors leaned forward. One of the insectoid admirals clicked his mandibles in disbelief. Somewhere behind Lyra, the black transmitter gave no sound, no glow, no visible signal, yet every eye kept returning to it as if it were a sleeping predator on the table. Malachar stared at her. "You dare invite extinction?" "No," Lyra said. "I am measuring whether you understand restraint." That landed harder than a threat. The Dominion had built its empire on the belief that restraint was weakness wearing ceremonial robes. It conquered because it could. It taxed because worlds could not refuse. It renamed slavery as protection, theft as tribute, and fear as stability. Yet the human had just allowed every flagship in orbit to recover after proving she could silence them altogether. She had shown a hand and hidden the fist. That was not weakness. That was discipline. The live broadcast continued without interruption. That was Malachar's mistake, though he did not know it yet. Across the conquered systems, billions watched from ration halls, mining dormitories, oxygen farms, orbital shipyards, and underground classrooms, where speaking against the Dominion meant losing one's family line. They saw the human commander standing alone beneath the execution lights. They saw the treaty unsigned. More importantly, they saw the sovereign hesitate. "Name your demonstration," Malachar said at last. A command priest flinched, and the movement was caught by the cameras. The galaxy saw that too. Lyra lifted her hand from the treaty and turned slightly toward the great transparent wall behind the throne. Beyond it, Dominion warships crowded the darkness in layered rings, a moving cathedral of gunmetal, banners, and orbital terror. But she did not point to them. She pointed past them, toward a distant red spark near the edge of the system. "There," she said, "the abandoned fortress above Vair's Ash." Several generals reacted before Malachar did. Their anger was too quick, too instinctive, and that made the fortress more interesting than Lyra had expected. Vair's Ash was not merely an old military platform. It was a wound in Dominion history. The station's databanks had named it a relic fortress, a dead moon wrapped in defense architecture from the Empire's first expansion age. No rebellion had ever breached it. No modern engineer fully understood it. No citizen was allowed within 1,000,000 kilometers of it. Malakar's golden veins slowed. That fortress is inactive. Then it cannot object, Lyra said. It is sacred Dominion property. So is Earth, according to the treaty. She glanced down at the document. I assumed sacred property could be transferred under pressure. A few conquered delegates lowered their heads quickly, hiding expressions that might have become smiles if hope were not still a punishable offense. Malakar saw the movement. His humiliation deepened. You will not touch that fortress, he said. Then the galaxy will know Earth asked for a harmless test, and the Dominion refused on its own broadcast. The trap closed so gently that even some of the war ministers did not recognize it until it had already cut them. If Malakar refused, fear would become visible. If he accepted, he would have to let a human device interact with a relic his own empire barely understood. Either way, the story had stopped being about Earth's surrender. It had become about what the Dominion was afraid to let humans prove. The Sovereign's hand rose. You may attempt your little display. The assembly exhaled, though no one admitted they had been holding breath. But understand this, Commander Dane. If your vessel fires upon Dominion property, if you damage a single sacred system beyond the terms I allow, Earth's surrender will be rejected. Your species will not be integrated. It will be erased. Lyra nodded once. Understood. Malakar looked toward the command priests. Open all tactical feeds. Let every world watch the humans fail. The order restored some energy to the chamber. Screens unfolded from the ceiling like sheets of liquid silver. Holographic projections appeared above the surrender platform, showing the distant fortress moon of Vair's Ash. It hung beside a dead red star, black and jagged, covered in weapon ribs, antenna forests, and ancient shield plates so massive they looked grown rather than built. Around it drifted the debris of old attackers, the shattered remains of species that had once believed courage was enough. A Dominion admiral recovered his confidence first. What will your hospital ship use? Human? Medical lasers? Rescue drones? A strongly worded request. A few nervous laughs followed. They were weaker than before, but they existed, and that was enough for Malakar to sit down again. Lyra did not answer the admiral. She touched the calm bead at her throat. Mercy Vessel Ardent, prepare Channel 13. The nearest command priest recoiled. Impossible. Malakar turned sharply. What? The priest's tendrils trembled over his console. Channel 13 is not active. It has not been active since before the Dominion calendar. It is a dead emergency band embedded in pre-imperial systems. No one uses it. Lyra looked at the priest then, and for the first time, the pity in her eyes became unmistakable. No one you remember. The words did something terrible to the chamber. They did not explain the transmitter. They did not reveal Earth's plan. They only widened the darkness beneath everything the Dominion thought it owned. Because empires survive by controlling history, and humanity had just spoken as if the Dominion's oldest history was incomplete. On the tactical screens, the human medical vessel turned slowly toward Vair's Ash. It did not open gun ports. It had none. It did not charge a weapon. It did not raise shields. Its lights simply dimmed until the ship looked almost dead against the stars. Inside the assembly, 1,000 alien rulers leaned closer. The black transmitter on the table remained still. Then every ancient machine in the hall began listening. The listening began without sound, which made it worse. Nothing in the Dominion assembly moved at first. No siren screamed. No shield gates slammed shut. No emergency priests dropped from the ceiling on silver cables. Yet the rulers felt the change before their instruments confirmed it. The air thinned around ancient consoles. Crystal archives awakened under sealed floors. Symbols that had been decorative for 10,000 years brightened along the walls, not in Dominion gold, but in a pale blue-white color no one in the chamber had authorized. High Sovereign Malachar turned slowly toward the nearest command priest. "Stop that." The priest's hands flew across the control altar. His claws moved with trained precision, entering overrides, authentication seals, bloodline commands, throne codes, and relic suppressions that had never failed in recorded history. Each command vanished from the screen before completion. Not rejected, not blocked, vanished, as if the machine had decided the order was too irrelevant to remember. "Stop it," Malachar repeated. "I am trying, Sovereign." Across the surrender platform, Lyra Dane stood with the same impossible calm, her eyes fixed not on the assembly, but on the distant fortress moon projected above them. Veyer's ash floated beside its dead star like a black crown torn from the skull of some forgotten god. It had survived rebellions, civil wars, invasion attempts, pirate crusades, and the collapse of 6 neighboring civilizations. The Dominion had used it as proof that resistance was not bravery, only delayed extinction. Now a human hospital ship faced it alone. The Mercy vessel Arden sent no visible beam. There was no flash from its hull, no roar from its engines, no heroic surge of power. The only change was a narrow tremor in the tactical feed, a ripple so faint that most viewers across the galaxy would have mistaken it for transmission noise. But every relic system in the assembly reacted like a chained animal hearing its true name. The first response came from the fortress itself. One line appeared across every Dominion screen at once. Authority query received. The chamber froze. Malachar's golden veins darkened. "That is not our script." The command priest swallowed through 3 throats. "No, Sovereign." "Then whose is it?" The priest did not answer, because another line had appeared at origin. Earth. For the first time in 900 systems, the Dominion's oldest fortress had publicly acknowledged a species the Empire had not yet conquered as something more than prey. It had not called Earth hostile. It had not called Earth foreign. It had not called Earth unauthorized. It had simply named it, and somehow that was more frightening than any attack could have been. A war minister surged from his throne. "Cut the broadcast." Malachar's head snapped toward him. "No." The minister stared in disbelief. "Sovereign, the lesser worlds are watching." "I know they are watching," Malachar hissed. "If we cut the feed now, they will believe we are afraid." "You are afraid," Lyra said. The words were quiet, but the microphones carried them to every tribute colony and slave port in Dominion space. Malachar turned back toward her with murder in his eyes. "You mistake discipline for fear." "No," Lyra said. "I know the difference. Humans learned it while hiding from you." The tactical feed magnified Veyer's ash. Its outer ring, a structure the size of a continent, began to rotate for the first time in centuries. Dominion officers shouted over one another as dead defense towers unlocked. Long-range cannons rose from black craters, and shield plates layered themselves into battle formation. For one thrilling second, the assembly regained hope. The fortress was not kneeling. It was waking. It was preparing to destroy the fragile human ship that had dared disturb it. Then every cannon pointed away from the Ardent. A silence deeper than the first blackout swallowed the hall. The fortress aimed at empty space. Not at Earth's vessel. Not at the Dominion station. Not at the fleets. It aimed toward the dead red star, toward the scarred void beyond it, toward some invisible coordinate buried in a war no living empire remembered. Its weapons charged, but did not fire. Its shields opened, but not outward. They opened inward, layer by layer, exposing the command core at the center of the fortress moon. The command priest whispered, "It is offering access." Malachar stepped down from his throne. "That fortress offers nothing. It obeys." Lyra finally looked at him. "That is what you taught it." The black transmitter on the surrender table warmed, though it still gave off no light. Lyra felt it through the metal, beneath her hand, a faint pulse like a heartbeat under stone. She did not fully understand it. Not even now. No human did. For 72 years, Earth's best linguists, mathematicians, trauma historians, child prodigies, artificial intelligences, and dying soldiers had studied the buried message beneath Antarctica and argued over what kind of civilization would leave behind a key that refused to answer cruelty. The Dominion thought humans had found a weapon. They had found a question. On the screens, a third line appeared. Prove intent. The assembly erupted. "What does that mean?" shouted a bone-crowned governor. "Is it asking the human ship?" "No, it is asking all of us." "Shut it down. Destroy the medical vessel. Do not fire while the fortress is active." Every voice became fear, wearing a different uniform. Lyra listened to it all, and beneath the chaos, she heard the thing humanity had waited decades to confirm. The Dominion did not know. They had built an empire inside a machine they did not understand, sitting on thrones wired into technology inherited from ghosts, ruling worlds with systems that had never truly belonged to them. Malachar raised both hands, and the assembly quieted by instinct. "Commander Dane," he said, each word polished with hatred, "you will order your vessel to withdraw." "No. If you continue, I will classify Earth as a contagion species." "You already classified us as property." "I will burn your atmosphere." "You already threatened to." "I will empty your oceans." "That is in the treaty." His mouth closed. The galaxy watched him run out of new threats. That was the moment the conquered worlds began to understand. In hidden shelters and ration lines, in mining shafts and shipyards, in nurseries where children had been taught never to say the word freedom aloud, billions saw the impossible shape of the confrontation. Earth was not stronger because it had bigger ships. Earth was stronger because the Dominion had nothing left to threaten that humanity had not already prepared to lose. Lyra touched her calm bead. "Ardent, continue." The Mercy vessel Ardent transmitted the second pulse. Verzash answered by opening its entire command core. For one instant, the hologram showed the interior of the fortress, a cathedral of black machinery surrounding a suspended sphere of white light. Around that sphere were millions of carved names, not Dominion names, not names from any known species registry, names older than the Empire, names erased from history. Then the fortress spoke in a language no Dominion translator recognized. Every machine in the assembly translated it anyway. Oath-bearers absent. Usurper command detected. Judgment protocol stirring. The dead star behind Vair's ash flickered. Not the fortress. The star. A red giant that had been cooling for millennia pulsed once with pale blue light. And across the Dominion capital system, every ancient weapon, every old gate, every throne-linked command circuit repeated the same unknown symbol. It burned above Malachar's throne. It burned on the surrender treaty. It burned across the sealed black transmitter under Lyra's hand. The command priest backed away from his altar, trembling. "Sovereign," he whispered, "the fortress is not receiving her command." Malachar's voice was barely audible. "Then what is it doing?" The priest looked at Lyra as if he were seeing the first human in the galaxy. "It is recognizing her." Recognition was more dangerous than surrender. Surrender could be explained. Surrender could be twisted into strategy, weakness, deception, or temporary malfunction. The Dominion had built entire ministries to turn failure into doctrine and shame into law. But recognition was different. Recognition meant the fortress moon of Vair's had looked past 10,000 years of imperial bloodlines, throne codes, conquest seals, and ceremonial ownership, and had answered a species the Dominion had not even allowed to sit. High Sovereign Malachar understood the danger before most of his ministers did. It was not the fortress that frightened him most. It was the viewers. Across 900 systems, the conquered were watching an ancient Dominion relic refuse to treat Earth like an inferior race. In the mines of Othuan, workers with metal dust in their lungs stopped swinging their tools. In the flooded farms of Terrell Minor, children lifted their heads from ration bowls as the symbol above Malakar's throne repeated across stolen government screens. In a prison ship orbiting the slave Moonkess, a teacher serving a life sentence for preserving banned history whispered the word humans as if it had become a prayer. Malakar's empire had survived rebellions, plagues, famine cycles, and civil wars. It had never survived hope spreading faster than fear. "End the feed," said War Minister Draxel. This time Malakar did not refuse. The order passed from throne to altar, from altar to orbital relay, from relay to the ancient broadcast spine that wrapped the capital station like a crown of frozen lightning. For half a second, the screens across Dominion space flickered. The assembly expected darkness. Instead, every screen brightened. The image sharpened until even the cracks in Malakar's golden-veined skin became visible. The broadcast did not end. It widened. It spilled into private channels, military channels, restricted education bands, execution feeds, mining monitors, nursery walls, and warship command decks that had never carried public transmission in their operational lives. The command priest stared at his altar. "Sovereign, the system has rejected the shutdown." "By whose authority?" The answer appeared before the priest could speak. Judgment protocol stirring. The words were no longer confined to Vair's ash. They moved across every Dominion interface in the assembly, pale and silent, as if a sleeping law had opened one eye. Lyra Dane did not move, but a chill passed through her. This was further than the Antarctic chamber had ever gone. On Earth, the buried transmitter had answered tests with fragments, warnings, permissions, and refusals. It had shut down weapons pointed at living targets. It had sealed itself for weeks after any researcher entered the chamber angry. It had once refused to open for an admiral who had suggested using it to conquer before being conquered, but it had never spread itself through an empire-wide broadcast network. Whatever humanity had awakened was not waiting anymore. Malakar stepped down from his throne and walked toward the surrender platform. His guards moved with him, tall armored shapes with crescent blades folded against their arms. The black transmitter sat beside the ensigned treaty, still plain, still silent, still small enough to crush beneath a boot. Every ruler in the chamber watched Malakar approach it as though physical closeness might restore ownership of the moment. "You found something beneath your ice," he said. Lyra's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. "A relic," Malakar continued. "A buried fragment from the first builders. A command seed, perhaps. A half-dead machine that flattered your frightened species with illusions of importance." He stopped at the edge of the table. "You mistook a tool for a destiny." Lyra's voice remained calm. "We mistook nothing. We spent 72 years assuming it might kill us if we misunderstood it." That confession unsettled the chamber more than a boast would have. The Dominion expected primitives to worship unknown power. It expected young species to grab weapons before asking what they cost. It expected fear to become greed the moment advantage appeared. Humanity had done something more alarming. Humanity had waited. Humanity had studied. Humanity had feared itself enough to be careful. A ripple of hidden messages began moving across the conquered worlds. They were short at first, only broken phrases smuggled through factory consoles and shipyard maintenance lines. Earth waited. Earth knew. Earth did not fire. In the assembly, Malakar extended one claw toward the transmitter. "Do not touch it," Lyra said. He smiled for the first time since the blackout. "You are in my hall." "No," Lyra said. "I am standing in a room built around a machine that has stopped obeying you." His smile vanished. Malakar's claw touched the transmitter. The reaction was immediate. No explosion tore through the platform. No dramatic beam struck him down. The transmitter simply became colder than vacuum and brighter than memory. Pale light traced the lines beneath Malakar's skin, turning his golden veins black for one terrible heartbeat. He stumbled backward with a sound that was not pain alone, but recognition of pain as judgment. His guards lunged forward, then froze as every blade in their arms locked inside its sheath. Across the hall, the command priest whispered. It refused him. That whisper was enough. The conquered worlds heard it. Malakar recovered quickly, but not completely. Smoke curled from the tips of his claws. The golden crown above his head flickered again, and this time it did not fully stabilize. His face hardened into something older than anger. "Commander Dane," he said, "you will order your ship to cease transmission." "I cannot." "You mean you will not?" "I mean the Ardent is no longer the only thing transmitting." Another line appeared across the assembly screens. Intent assessment expanding. War Minister Draxel slammed his fist against his throne. "This is contamination. This is system infection. Sovereign, classify Earth for immediate purging." The word purging should have sent terror through any human. It had ended species before. It meant no surrender accepted, no prisoners preserved, no cultural archives spared. It meant atmosphere ignition, ocean poisoning, gene vault destruction, and the removal of a people not only from territory, but from record. Lyra heard the word and thought of Earth. She thought of cities under blue morning skies, of children sleeping beside windows, of orbital gardens, of the Antarctic chamber, where the transmitter had waited beneath ice older than language. She thought of the thousands of empty cryopods aboard the Ardent, each one prepared not for humans fleeing defeat, but for whoever might need saving if the Dominion forced the ancient systems into collapse. She thought of how many times Earth's leaders had argued, shouted, wept, and voted before sending her here with a hospital ship instead of a hidden battle fleet. Then she looked at Malakar and understood that mercy had not made him pause. It had only made him curious about how much violence he could still get away with. Malakar turned slightly, his damaged claw hidden behind his ceremonial robes. "Prepare contingency ashfall." The command came through a private channel, but the transmitter pulsed under Lyra's hand. It did not reveal the words to the assembly. It revealed something worse to her. A tactical image appeared inside her left contact lens. 40 Dominion execution carriers had detached from a shadow dock behind the capital's outer moon. They were not moving toward the Ardent. They were not moving toward Vaerzash. They were folding into long-range transit, their vectors aligned with the Sol system. Earth. Lyra's heartbeat changed once, sharply, then steadied. Malakar watched her face. He knew she had seen something. "Is there a problem, Commander?" The private channel in her ear crackled with a voice from Earth Command. Thin under distance and encryption. "Lyra, we have detected launch signatures. Multiple hostile carriers. Projected arrival near Earth defense perimeter before negotiations conclude. Full judgment pulse remains unstable. Repeat, full pulse may burn out the transmitter permanently." Lyra did not answer. "Commander," Earth Command continued, and this time the voice lowered. "If you use it now, you may get one galaxy-wide command. One command. One chance to stop the fleet. One chance to expose the Dominion. One chance to free the conquered systems. One chance to save Earth, without becoming the kind of species that used ancient power, because it could." All around her, rulers waited for fear to crack her open. Across the galaxy, slaves and soldiers and starving children watched a human woman stand before the empire that had already sent death toward her home. Malakar leaned closer. "You look pale." Lyra lifted her eyes to him. Outside, the medical vessel Ardent hung alone beneath the Dominion fleet, its empty cryopods waiting in the dark. Beyond it, the fortress of Vaerzash kept its ancient core open like an eye. Far away, 40 execution carriers entered the void road to Earth, and beneath Lyra's palm, the black transmitter began to count down. The countdown did not appear on the assembly screens. It did not announce itself with warning tones, flashing lights, or the theatrical cruelty Dominion machines preferred when they prepared to kill. It appeared only in Lyra Dane's contact lens, as a thin ring of pale numbers turning around the image of Earth, each second shrinking the distance between 40 execution carriers and the planet that had taught her the meaning of home. 7 minutes to Sol perimeter breach. 6 minutes and 59 seconds. 6 minutes and 58. High Sovereign Malachar watched her carefully, enjoying the first visible sign that he had wounded her calm. He did not yet know what she was seeing, but he knew fear when it passed behind a human's eyes. It pleased him. Fear was familiar ground. Fear was the language in which the Dominion had written law for 10,000 years. You may still sign, he said. Earth may still survive as a guided species. Lyra looked down at the surrender treaty. The line reserved for her name gleamed under the ceremonial lights. It looked so harmless. Just a narrow space waiting for ink, but beneath it was the death of human choice, human memory, human future. The Dominion did not only conquer planets, it edited them. It softened their songs. It renamed their wars. It taught children that their ancestors had begged for order and that their chains were proof of civilization. Humanity had studied that too, not the weapons first. The pattern. Every conquered species had lost its history before it lost its borders. Lyra slowly removed her hand from the transmitter. The countdown continued. 6 minutes and 32 seconds. You think this is about surrender, she said. Malachar's damaged claw twitched beneath his robe. It is. No, it was never about surrender. A murmur passed through the assembly. The war ministers leaned forward. The command priests looked between Lyra, the transmitter, and the spreading pale symbols across their consoles. On 1,000 occupied worlds, viewers pressed closer to screens they had once feared, sensing that the human commander was no longer reacting to the Empire. She was moving toward something she had intended from the start. Lyra touched the calm bead at her throat. Earth Command, open archive dawn. For the first time since the ceremony began, the voice from Earth hesitated. Confirm request. Open archive dawn, Lyra repeated. Malachar's eyes narrowed. What is archive dawn? Lyra did not answer him. She faced the broadcast pillars, letting every camera capture her face clearly. She had been told to keep the truth hidden as long as possible, not because Earth was ashamed of it, because truth released too early becomes a target before it becomes a weapon. But the Dominion had sent killers toward Earth, and the old rules had ended the moment Malachar chose murder over humility. Across the assembly, the holograms shifted. The image of Vaer's ash faded. The surrender treaty vanished. In their place appeared Earth, not as the Dominion had shown it in conquest maps, not marked by resource zones and labor populations, but whole and blue and alive. Then the view plunged south, through white cloud bands, over a continent of ice. The image descended into a fracture hidden beneath Antarctica, a wound sealed under kilometers of frozen darkness, where human floodlights surrounded something that had never belonged to any human age. It was a door, not metal, not stone, not any material Dominion scanners could name. It stood upright in a cavern older than cities, covered in the same pale symbol now burning on Malachar's throne. Around it were layers of human scaffolding, research stations, prayer ribbons, memorial plaques, warning signs, and containment walls built and rebuilt by generations that had died before seeing this day. The assembly went completely still. Lyra spoke to the galaxy. 72 years ago, humanity heard the Dominion's first deep space transmissions. Our public celebrated. Our children drew pictures of alien friends. Our leaders prepared greetings. But our linguists found something buried inside your signals. The holograms split open, showing sound patterns command structures, old Dominion military codes, and beneath them a second architecture, older, cleaner, hidden like bones beneath stolen skin. You were not speaking with one voice, Lyra continued. Your machines carried another language underneath yours, a language your empire used but did not understand. The command priest nearest Malachar whispered, "That is forbidden archive structure." "No," Lyra said, turning toward him. "It is original archive structure." The word original spread like fire. The hologram changed again. Human researchers appeared in flashes, not as a story, but as evidence. A young mathematician, weeping after the first successful translation. A gray-haired engineer placing her palm against the Antarctic door as it opened 1 centimeter after 18 years of failure. A council of Earth leaders voting against weaponizing the Discovery after simulations predicted mass civilian collapse. Thousands of names carved into a memorial wall, people who had died testing a power that refused arrogance, refused cruelty, refused command issued in hatred. Malachar's voice became low. "Lies." Lyra looked at him. "Then your machines will reject them." The transmitter pulsed. The pale symbols across the hall brightened, but did not vanish. Lyra turned back to the galaxy. "We did not build the key. We found it. We did not master it. We survived being judged by it." The chamber seemed to lose weight. Even the Dominion guards shifted uneasily now. The idea was too large, too offensive to Imperial logic. Power was supposed to belong to whoever seized it. Authority was supposed to flow from conquest, from fleets, from fear, from the number of worlds that bowed when your name was spoken. Humanity was claiming something else entirely. Not ownership, not superiority, worthiness. The hologram showed the Antarctic door opening fully for the first time. Behind it was not a weapon chamber. It was a hall of light filled with millions of empty spaces shaped like memory stones. Most were dark. One had awakened when humans entered, and above it had appeared the same question in a language no one alive had spoken. Lyra's voice softened. "The first translation was wrong. We thought it said, 'Who commands?' It did not." The transmitter lifted from the table without being touched. Every blade in the assembly locked. Every gun in orbit paused its targeting cycle. Every ancient circuit in every Dominion ship opened a listening channel. Lyra stared at Malachar. The correct translation was, "Who protects?" 5 minutes to Sol perimeter breach. The execution carriers were moving faster now. Lyra saw them in the corner of her vision. Black shapes riding folded space toward Earth's blue gravity well. The full judgment pulse trembled inside the transmitter, building toward a command that could stop them. Perhaps stop everything. Perhaps reach too far and break systems that innocent worlds needed to breathe. Malachar saw the tension in her jaw and smiled again. "So, even your miracle has limits." "Yes," Lyra said. "That is why we feared it." He lifted his chin. "And I do not." The answer came not from Lyra, but from every Dominion console at once. Intent contradiction detected. Malachar froze. The transmitter rotated slowly in the air, its black surface peeling back in impossible layers, revealing no machinery inside, only pale light folded around darkness. The assembly screens shifted from Earth's Antarctic archive to the 40 execution carriers racing toward Sol. For the first time, the conquered galaxy saw them. Not rumors, not hidden orders. Proof. Gasps moved across occupied worlds. Anger followed. On mining moons, workers stood. In prison ships, inmates slammed fists against transparent walls. On tribute planets, parents pulled children closer as the truth became undeniable. While speaking peace in public, the Dominion had sent annihilation in secret. The Judgment Protocol did not need Lyra to accuse him. The evidence had done it for her. Malachar looked up at the broadcast with sudden fury. "Cut that image." No system obeyed. For minutes and 12 seconds, Lyra stepped toward the floating transmitter. This is not a weapon, Sovereign. It is a question your empire has avoided for 10,000 years. The pale light spread from the transmitter to the treaty, burning through every clause of ownership, tribute, labor seizure, ocean claim, and child integration until the document curled into ash without flame. Then the voice of the ancient system spoke through the assembly itself, calm, vast, and unbearable. Protective claim verified. Earth. Usurper violence verified. Dominion. Judgment key accepting human hand. Lyra raised her palm. Malakar's war ministers shouted. Guards surged forward and stopped as their armor locked around them. The command priests fell back from altars that no longer recognized their touch. Outside, the Dominion fleets began to drift, every weapon waiting for the next breath. 3 minutes to Earth. Lyra's hand closed around the awakened key, and somewhere beneath Antarctica, the ancient door opened all the way. The moment Lyra Dane touched the judgment key, every weapon in the Dominion capital system remembered that it had a conscience. IT did not happen like a malfunction. Malfunctions were ugly, random things, full of sparks, alarms, and desperate engineers shouting at screens. This was clean. This was orderly. Across thousands of warships, gun ports closed with ceremonial precision. Missile racks sealed themselves behind armored shutters. Planet cracker cores dropped from firing temperature to cold standby. Targeting halos vanished from Earth's medical vessel, from the assembly station, from the distant fortress of Vair's Ash, and from every inhabited moon within range. The machines did not fail. They refused. For one breath, the Dominion became quiet enough to hear its own terror. Then the screaming began. War ministers roared from their thrones as their command panels filled with pale symbols. Admirals demanded manual override. Command priests sliced their palms open over blood authentication altars, pressing royal DNA into machines that had obeyed their bloodlines for centuries. Nothing answered them. Their codes did not return errors. Their codes were ignored as if they had never been authority at all. High Sovereign Malakar stood motionless at the center of the chaos, staring at Lyra as though hate alone might restore his empire. The golden crown above him flickered again, then dimmed to a dull ring of dead metal. He touched it once, almost unconsciously, and the gesture exposed him more completely than fear ever could. A ruler who needed his crown to answer had already lost something no fleet could recover. Lyra barely saw him. Her vision was filled with Earth. 3 minutes to Sol perimeter breach became 2 minutes and 59 seconds, then 2 minutes and 58. The 40 execution carriers were still moving, their folded space wakes burning like scars through the dark. The first wave of the Judgment Pulse had disarmed the capital fleets, but the Punishment Fleet remained partially shielded by distance and transit distortion. Its weapons were not yet aimed at Earth, not officially, not in a way the key could judge with certainty. Earth Command's voice shook in her ear. Lyra, the carrier fleet has not powered down. Their targeting arrays are dark, but their drive cores are still accelerating. If they exit transit inside lunar distance, they can fire manually before the system completes assessment. Lyra tightened her grip around the key. It was weightless and impossibly heavy at the same time, like holding a decision that belonged to every human who had ever looked up at the night sky and wondered whether something out there would one day come to take their children. "What are my options?" she asked. The answer came not from Earth Command, but from the assembly itself. Full judgment pulse available. A second line followed. Warning. Civilian infrastructure entanglement unknown. The holograms shifted, showing a map of Dominion space threaded with ancient systems. War grids overlapped with hospital networks. Military relays shared architecture with oxygen farms. Prison gates drew power from the same relic logic as nursery shields on frozen colonies. The Dominion had not merely stolen ancient technology, it had woven it into everything careless and arrogant, until weapons and survival systems were tangled together like veins around a blade. If Lyra released the full pulse, she could stop the execution carriers. She could silence every Dominion weapon in every occupied system. She might also shut down life support on colonies that had never chosen the empire ruling them. Malachar saw the map and understood before his ministers did. Slowly, horribly, he began to smile. "There it is," he said. "The human weakness." Lyra looked at him. "Mercy," he said, tasting the word like poison he had finally learned to use. "You have the hand of a god around my throat, and still you hesitate, because strangers might suffer. Do you see now why your species was meant to kneel? Power belongs to those willing to use it." Across the chamber, some Dominion rulers regained their courage, not because they believed Malachar was winning, but because cruelty is easiest when it thinks goodness has limits. A reptilian governor rose from his heat throne and pointed toward Lyra. "She cannot fire it." A bone-masked admiral hissed agreement. "The human will not risk civilian worlds." A minister with silver skin laughed, too loudly. "Then her key is a leash around her own hand." The conquered galaxy heard them. More importantly, Earth heard them. In cities beneath protective domes, in underground schools, in orbital farms, in ships hiding beyond Neptune with engines cold and weapons silent, humans watched their commander stand alone with a choice no person should have been forced to carry. To save Earth instantly, she might harm innocents. To spare innocents, she might give the execution fleet time to burn Earth's cities from orbit. Lyra closed her eyes for 1 second. She did not see the assembly. She saw the Antarctic chamber on the day she had first been allowed inside. She had been younger then, angry enough to believe anger was clarity. An old scientist, named Dr. Sanaa had stood beside the ancient door and told her that humanity's greatest danger was not alien conquest. It was finding a power large enough to make conquest seem reasonable. Lyra had not understood then. She did now. She opened her eyes. "No full pulse," she said. Earth command went silent. Malachar's smile widened. "Then Earth dies noble." "No," Lyra said. "Earth survives human." She raised the key, and instead of commanding the ancient network to break the Dominion, she gave it a narrower truth. Disable only weapons actively preparing to fire on inhabited worlds. Ignore civilian systems. Ignore medical systems. Ignore life support. Ignore transport. Touch nothing that keeps children breathing. The assembly screens flashed. Command requires precision beyond standard judgment. Lyra's voice did not shake. "Then learn from us." The key pulsed once. The pulse did not spread like a blast. It spread like a verdict being carefully read. Across Dominion space, orbital cannons aimed at rebellious cities went cold. Bombardment platforms above tribute worlds locked their barrels toward empty sky. Missile silos beneath enslaved moons opened, not to fire, but to release their warheads inert into containment cradles. Slave control turrets in labor camps folded into the ground, that hovering over prison populations, dropped harmlessly into sand, snow, mud, and factory floors. World by world, the Empire's raised hand fell open. Hope did not erupt all at once. It began as disbelief. A miner on Othuan touched the dead turret that had watched his family for 30 years. A child on Terrell Minor saw the punishment drones fall from the clouds like broken insects. Prisoners on Kess stared upward as the guns above their exercise yard turned away. Then, across the conquered systems, people began to understand that Earth had been given the chance to destroy and had chosen to protect. That was when the Dominion truly began to lose. But the execution fleet kept coming. 1 minute and 12 seconds to Sol perimeter breach. Earth command returned, urgent and strained. "Lyra, 39 carriers are powering down. One remains active. Lead vessel. Its weapon systems are isolated from the network. Manual control confirmed. On the hologram, 39 black carriers slowed and drifted dark. The final ship tore past them, vast and angular, its forward cannon unfolding like the jaw of a metal beast. Its commander appeared on the assembly feed without permission, a Dominion warlord with scarred armor and eyes full of fanatic triumph. "Sovereign," the warlord said, "I have severed all ancient command links. My ship obeys only living hands. Give the word, and Earth's largest city becomes glass." Malachar stepped forward, eyes blazing with restored hope. Lyra stared at the countdown. 40 seconds. 39. 38. The judgment key remained warm in her hand, but for the first time since it awakened, it gave no answer. For the first time since the ceremony began, Lyra Dane had no machine answer, no ancient verdict, no hidden system rising beneath her feet to turn fear into awe. She had only 40 seconds, one hospital ship, one judgment key that could not touch a vessel severed from its own conscience, and a Dominion warlord racing toward Earth with a cannon large enough to turn a coastline into a wound visible from the moon. The assembly saw it. The conquered worlds saw it. Malachar saw it most clearly of all, and the hope returning to his face was more terrible than his rage had ever been. It was the hope of a tyrant who had discovered that even miracles have edges. He lifted his damaged claw toward the hologram of the lead carrier and spoke with the slow pleasure of a ruler reclaiming the shape of history. "Fire when ready." Across the broadcast, the rogue flagship's cannon unfolded another layer. Its reactor brightened from red to white. Earth filled the tactical projection beneath it, blue and defenseless, alive with weather systems and sleeping cities and oceans that had never asked to become bargaining pieces in another species' empire. The target marker settled over the largest coastal population cluster in the Western Hemisphere. Not a military base, not a weapons platform, a city of families, hospitals, schools, ports, and ordinary lights. 32 seconds. Earth Command spoke in Lyra's ear, but the voice was no longer issuing orders. It was trying not to break. "Commander, evacuation is impossible. Civilian shield grids cannot take a direct manual strike. We need another option." Lyra looked toward the Mercy vessel Ardent hanging outside the assembly station. Its hull was scarred from years of rescue work, not war. Its engines were too weak to intercept. Its medical bays were empty except for thousands of cryopods prepared for victims humanity had never met. For a fraction of a second, the bitter irony almost made her laugh. Earth had crossed the stars ready to save alien civilians from the collapse of their own empire, and now it could not reach its own. Then she saw the cryopods. Not physically, she saw them in memory, row after row inside the ardent, polished, cold, waiting. During mission briefing, one counselor had asked why a surrender envoy needed evacuation capacity for non-human biology. Dr. Aline had answered simply, "Because if we are right about the Dominion, someone innocent will be trapped near the consequences." Someone innocent. Lyra turned away from Malachar and faced the nearest camera. Broadcast all medical manifests from the Ardent. Malachar's expression sharpened. "Irrelevant." "Do it," Lyra said. The Ardent obeyed. Across the assembly screens, the tactical image split open into thousands of biological compatibility files, not human names, but species markers from conquered worlds. Othuan miners, Terrell flood farmers, Kess prison-born children, Dominion civilians from lower castes, enemy soldiers with non-lethal injury profiles, refugees from worlds that had not yet dared to rebel. Every cryopod aboard the Ardent had been calibrated for someone the Dominion considered expendable. The chamber changed again. It was not fear this time. It was recognition of a different kind. The conquered species watching from across the galaxy, understood the message before the Dominion rulers did. Earth had not brought a hospital ship because it was weak. Earth had brought a hospital ship because it had expected the powerful to endanger the powerless, and humanity had prepared to save them anyway. 24 seconds. The rogue warlord laughed from the hologram. Sentiment will not stop physics. No, Lyra said, but truth might stop obedience. She looked at the alien archivist, standing half-hidden behind a collapsed documentation dais near the lower gallery. He was small by Dominion standards, a thin gray being named Vale Orin, marked by the copper collar of a record-keeper caste. He had been silent through the ceremony, except for the way his eyes kept following the ancient symbols, as though he recognized their grammar from forbidden fragments. Earlier, when the fortress spoke, he had whispered translations before the machines finished rendering them. Now Lyra met his gaze. Vale went still. "You know what this is," she said. Malachar turned. "The archivist will remain silent." Vale's throat trembled. Generations of obedience lived in that tremor. Record keepers were allowed to preserve approved facts, not interpret them. They copied victories, not truths. They dated massacres according to imperial necessity. They learned early that memory belonged to whoever owned the archive. But the Dominion's weapons were falling silent across the galaxy, and Earth's hospital ship had just shown the names of the people it had come prepared to save. Vale stepped forward. Malachar's voice cracked like a whip. "Kneel." Vale nearly did, his knees bent by instinct. Then the pale symbol above the dead crown brightened, and he stopped halfway down, shaking violently, caught between terror and a word older than fear. "No," he whispered. The assembly heard it. A record keeper had refused. Vale lifted his head. "There is a law." Malachar lunged toward him, but his guards remained locked, their armor still refusing violence. "Silence." Vale's voice grew stronger, as if each word pulled him out of a grave. The first builders encoded a sovereign limitation into all command-bearing systems. No machine created for protection may permanently serve authority proven to enslave sentient life through fear. The assembly erupted, but Lyra raised the key. "Say it again," she commanded. Vale turned toward the broadcast pillars. His body was trembling so hard he could barely stand, but his voice carried into every world that Dominion had tried to keep voiceless. The machines cannot be owned by tyrants. They can only be deceived by them. 18 seconds. The rogue flagship continued its charge. Its cannon reached firing threshold. Because it had severed its ancient command links, it could not hear the judgment key. It could not hear Vale. It could not hear the law, but its crew could. Lyra saw the path then. Impossible and human in its simplicity. The machine could not be reached from outside, so the truth had to enter through the living. "Open return broadcast," she said. "All worlds, all channels, no filters." Earth Command understood instantly. "Lyra, that will expose the network to uncontrolled civilian input." "Yes, it may overload the key. Then let it learn what the Dominion buried." The key pulsed, uncertain for the first time, and the broadcast widened beyond the assembly, beyond command channels, beyond approved citizenship bands. It opened to mining consoles, prison walls, refugee transmitters, broken classroom screens, contraband radios, maintenance relays, smuggled prayer devices, and every small illegal receiver that had ever carried hope in secret. Lyra faced the galaxy. "If the Dominion has ruled you by fear, speak. If its weapons took your children, speak. If your history was erased, speak. If you were told you were alone, speak now." For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Malachar smiled. Then Othyan answered, not with a speech, but with thousands of minor identification codes, each attached to a death record marked accidental collapse. Terrell Minor answered with the names of children taken for tribute academies. Kess answered with prison logs, forbidden songs, final messages scratched into ship walls. One world after another joined, not in perfect order, not in clean testimony, but in a flood of pain too vast for imperial language to contain. The judgment key blazed in Lyra's hand. 10 seconds. The rogue flagship's crew received the broadcast. Their screens filled with faces, names, evidence, cries, songs, graves, and the medical manifests of the human ship sent to save people they had been ordered to call lesser. Somewhere inside that severed vessel, living hands hesitated over manual fire controls. The warlord screamed, "Obey me." 6 seconds. Across the flagship's bridge, one junior officer removed his hand from the firing key. 5 seconds. Another followed. 4. The warlord drew his sidearm and shot the first officer through the chest. 3. The bridge crew stared at the body, then at Earth, then at the flood of voices shaking every speaker. 2. The cannon reached final release. 1. And inside the rogue flagship, someone pulled the emergency command lever the Dominion had forgotten was not built for rulers, but for mutiny. The rogue flagship did not fire. Its cannon held the city in its sights for one final, endless heartbeat, bright enough to turn night into false dawn across half of Earth's western horizon. Millions of humans looked up from streets, rooftops, shelters, hospitals, and control rooms, not knowing that the difference between life and extinction had narrowed to a single lever pulled by a nameless alien officer on a bridge built for conquest. Then the white light inside the cannon collapsed inward. The targeting halo broke into fragments. The warship's engines dimmed, and the vast shadow that had come to kill Earth became only metal drifting above a world that had refused to kneel. No one in the assembly spoke. Even Malachar seemed carved from dead glass, his damaged claw hanging at his side, his crown dark above his head. The Dominion had lost battles before. It had buried rebellions under ash and rewritten defeats into strategic withdrawals. But this was not defeat in any language its historians could repair. Its own soldiers had heard the voices of the enslaved and chosen disobedience. Its own machines had heard the ancient law and chosen refusal. Its victim had held the power to destroy and chosen mercy so precisely that the Empire's cruelty became the only thing left exposed. Lyra Dane lowered the judgment key, but the light did not leave the chamber. It remained in the walls, in the consoles, in the broadcast pillars, and in the faces of the conquered delegates who had spent their lives making themselves small enough to survive. Vale Orin, the record keeper who had dared to speak, stood trembling beside the collapsed archive dais. He looked older now, and younger too, as if fear had been aging him for decades, and one act of truth had returned part of his stolen life. Across Dominion space, weapons stayed silent. Orbital cannons refused bombardment orders. Prison gates opened only for release, not execution. Tribute locks disengaged. Slave collars lost their command signals and fell from millions of necks like dead insects. In shipyards where workers had expected punishment, Dominion overseers found their shock towers folded into the floor. In nurseries where children had been taught to praise the sovereign before their own mothers, wall screens showed Earth's blue planet and the words of the ancient law translated into every banned language. Malachar finally moved. His eyes remained on the dead crown. "You have taken my empire." Lyra looked at him with something colder than hatred and more painful than pity. "No, you lost the right to command it." A war minister staggered from his throne. "Then what do humans demand? Territory? Tribute? Hostages? Access to the relic network?" The question revealed the Empire's last misunderstanding. Even broken, it could only imagine victory as ownership. Every ruler in the assembly waited for the price of Earth's restraint, expecting a throne to change hands, not the meaning of power itself. Lyra placed the judgment key back on the surrender table. The burned treaty lay in gray curls beside it, every clause of human ownership erased. Earth demands immediate freedom votes for every occupied species, the release of political prisoners, the end of forced tribute, open refugee corridors, public restoration of erased histories, and no Dominion fleet may enter another inhabited system without invitation. The chamber absorbed the terms in stunned silence. And humanity? Malachar asked. Humanity takes no throne. That sentence traveled farther than the judgment pulse. On Othuan, miners who had never owned the ore they dug sank to their knees, not in submission, but because their legs could no longer hold the weight of sudden possibility. On Terrell Minor, flood farmers opened sealed family shrines and brought out names that had been illegal to speak. On Kess, prison doors slid open while guards stood helpless beside weapons that would not answer them. In the rogue flagship above Earth, the officer who had pulled the emergency lever wept beside the body of the crewmate the warlord had killed, knowing the first free act of his life had saved a world he had been taught to despise. Malachar's voice thinned, and if we refuse... The judgment key pulsed once, not threatening, simply present. Lyra did not raise her voice. Then your machines will continue asking who you protect. One by one, the rulers understood. The Dominion was not being conquered from outside. It was being measured from within. Every order, every fleet movement, every prison command, every tax seizure, every public execution would now meet the same ancient question. Who protects? The Empire could not continue because the lie beneath it had lost technical support. Vale stepped into the open broadcast, his copper record-keeper collar still locked around his neck. Let the record show, he said, voice shaking but unbroken, that Earth arrived in a medical vessel, carrying rescue chambers for species not its own. Let the record show that humanity gained command authority and refused empire. Let the record show that the Dominion fell not because humans hated us, but because they would not become us. His collar snapped open and struck the floor. That sound broke the assembly, not with violence, with surrender. The first governor agreed, because his fleets no longer obeyed. The second agreed, because his own guards had lowered their weapons. The third agreed because his homeworld's broadcast was already filled with citizens chanting names erased from official history. Then the others followed, some in fear, some in shame, some because they had finally seen the future arriving and knew it did not need their permission. Last of all, Malachar bowed his head. He did not kneel. Lyra had not asked him to. Humanity had not crossed the stars to teach kneeling. Within hours, the decrees went out. Within days, ships carrying prisoners returned home. Within weeks, worlds that had not voted in centuries filled public squares with voices. The Dominion did not vanish cleanly. No empire built on fear dies without leaving scars. There were riots, trials, sabotage attempts, revenge plots, and old governors hiding behind private armies. But the weapons that had made tyranny effortless no longer answered tyrants, and that changed the shape of courage across the galaxy. 3 days after the assembly, Lyra stood alone inside the Arden's medical bay. The cryopods remained empty, their glass lids reflecting stars. Earth had survived. The conquered worlds had spoken. The judgment key had gone dark, sealed again into a smooth black shape that felt almost ordinary in her hand. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt the terrifying quiet that comes after history turns and leaves living people to decide whether they deserve the miracle they received. Vale entered slowly, no collar at his throat. The liberated worlds are repeating your signal, he said. Not the judgment command. The other one. Lyra looked up. What other one? He activated a small recorder. Across the medical bay, thousands of voices played in thousands of languages, all carrying the same human phrase, Earth Command had embedded beneath every transmission as a safety marker, never meant as prophecy, never meant as a banner. We came to protect. Lyra closed her eyes. Far beyond the ardent, former slave worlds lit their skies with pale blue signals, not as weapons, not as threats, but as promises passed from moon to moon, station to station, child to child. Earth had entered the assembly with no armada, no demand for worship, and no hunger for a throne. It had brought a hospital ship, a question, and the one kind of power the Dominion had never prepared to fight: restraint. And beneath Antarctica, in the hall behind the ancient door, one of the millions of dark memory stones awakened by itself, it displayed a new message in a language humanity could now read. The protectors have been found.